So then a paper by Nocco on enterprise risk management, which reappears in the curriculum, continues to have low testability. We're asked to define enterprise risk management. A corporation can manage risk either one risk at a time. That's the straw concept or the straw man. And it'd be preferable for the enterprise for the corporation to use enterprise risk management and view all the risks together in a coherent, coordinated, and strategic framework. This way, enterprise risk management can create value at both the macro company level and at the micro business unit level. Then the authors give us a sort of illustrate a methodology, and this is captured in Learning Spreadsheet 7B1. And we need a couple of ingredients here. One is the transition matrix that we saw from the credit rating agencies. Of course, this could be doesn't need to be externally driven. And then the board, the board of directors, as fiduciary to shareholders and management, can articulate a risk appetite or target profile for the company. So in this example, management articulates the risk appetite with the following statement: let us be 93% confident that over the period our rating won't fall to, you can see, BAA or worse. And so notice it's a probabilistic statement that on the rate from high to low rating, the notion is we can't be certain that we won't fall to a lower rating class, but let's be somewhat confident that by the end of the period we won't end up at this rating or worse. And then the idea is just to use that statement to infer what the optimal target rating to start the period from is. And so you can see, for example, if the company targets a current rating of BAA, then the probability of ending the period at that rating or below would be captured here in this light pink row, the summation, which is 94.6%. And that makes them too risky relative to the appetite, so they need to start at a higher rating. If they start at AA here, then the probability of finishing the period or migrating or being downgraded to BAA or below is only 1.05%. So they can target here, but that's going to be too conservative relative to their risk appetite. And so right in the middle here, it's sort of a Goldilocks, right? This is just the right amount of risk. If they currently target an A rating at the beginning of the period, then the yellow bar indicates, if we sum those probabilities, that indicates the probability that by the end of the period they will migrate to BAA or below, and there's a 6.66% chance of that happening, which is the nearest one in alignment to the articulation of their risk appetite. So the risk appetite statement and the transition matrix or migration matrix, those two in combination tell the firm that they can target the rating of A at the beginning of the period. See how that works? So we've translated, in the first step, we've translated the risk appetite into a target rating. And then this is the same, this is the spreadsheet that I've constructed in 7B1 that just operationalizes the notion we just saw. You can just input in the actual rating, and it produces the correct output. The second step then is to take that target, that rating, which corresponds to a target probability of 3.4%. Let me just go back to that just to show that. Or rather, if we look at this second matrix here, if our target rating is AA, then that corresponds to a default of a probability of default of 3.4%. Then here, the second step takes that probability of default of 3.4%. Let me just restate how we got there. Right, we the firm starts with an articulation of the risk appetite, a probabilistic statement, uses a migration matrix to infer where it should currently target its rating, and then that rating is going to correspond based on some assumption to a probability of default, and that could include a mapping. And so now the risk articulation has been converted into or translated into a target probability of default. And then, no surprise here with Stolz, uses the Merton model to infer the equity that would be required in order to produce a target probability default of 3.4%. So in this case, the reversing that, we need some assumptions, but if we solve out for the Merton, the equity needed would be about 3.98. You can consider that almost 4 million. In other words, if the firm value, assuming a current debt, total debt threshold or default level of 10 million, and then equity 3.98, the firm would have a value of almost 14 million. So it'd be about, you can see it's about 3.98 above, sort of in the money relative to its insolvency. And then using the Merton model assumptions, that's that estimation of the tail area in the future physical distribution, the probability of default's about 3.4%. So we use the sort of the reverse application of the Merton. Rather than taking the parameters of the firm and solving for the probability of default, we take the target probability of default and solve for how much equity cushion the firm needs to support that. And so that's the two-step process that gets us from originally the firm's shareholder board and management articulating a risk appetite into a number for the equity that the firm wants to have to support the probability of default that's consistent with that risk appetite. And so the generic steps here are: 1, determine the firm's risk appetite. That's the level of acceptable risk. 2, estimate the capital requirements. 3, determine the mix of capital risk. And 4, decentralize, which in practice would be an important step, right, to operationalize or to imbue the firm with the results of the risk analysis. So they make a point about the relationship between economic value and accounting performance, and there's some natural tendencies, a natural tension, because in regard to accounting performance, the firm must target accounting-based ratios, but cash flows determine the company value. So to focus on cash flows is to focus on economic value, but smoother cash flows tend to produce more volatile accounting earnings. Again, the aim about distinguishing between economic and regulatory capital. So just another perspective on that same distinction here, where Stolz and Nocco say that economic capital is the amount of equity capital required for the company to achieve its optimal rating, and regulatory capital is defined by regulatory accounting.